Well, hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And thank you very much for coming. Uh, our topic for today is free speech, Biden complicit, and what we can do to halt the genocide, what to stop it from actually becoming a full-blown genocide. And so I'm just coming off the Around the World with Dee and Friends show. There we were discussing an article from The Intercept by Jeremy Scahill, the point of which was to demonstrate that the war in Gaza is basically a joint war of the United States and Israel against the Gazans, the Palestinians. And I think this is very much to the point. We will be discussing here the complicity of Joe Biden in joining to support the Israelis, in Gaza in actions that violate, international law. So I'll be starting that in just a minute. I'm being joined tonight by Madeline Hoffman. Hello, Madeline.
Hello, Joe. Long time no see, right?
Yeah, not too long. Madeline is joining us from Colombia tonight, and joining us because of the importance of these topics, and
You got
also
that right.
because we want to discuss, continue to discuss the major issues uh, that, in a symbolic sense at least, are torturing us. Not in the same sense of torture the Palestinians are going through, but still, this is a pretty tortuous kind of process that we are going through now. And let's see, there's Brandy Weaver here right now. Hi, Brandy. It's good to see you. And hopefully, shortly, you'll be joined by other compatriots. But for the present, I'm going to start off with a piece from Common Dreams.
Hi, Steve.
Steve
Welcome.
arrived. Hey, Steve, how are you? And this piece is called Biden's Complicity in Gaza Violates International Law.
When was it written, Joe?
It was written on December 14th.
All right, so it was today.
It's brand spanking new, and it's by Farah Hassan. Not
Hmm.
sure I pronounced her name correctly. Okay, it could be Farah.
Hmm. I
But,
think it's Farah, but I'm not positive. So,
okay, I think there's a similar name across, uh, the Islamic areas,
yes,
and that may be pronounced slightly differently in some areas as opposed to others. And we don't
yes,
know where Farah actually comes from.
yes.
That may have to do with the pronunciation. Anyway, the tagline is the U.S. government often claims to stand for justice and the rule of law, but is it willing to stand by those principles for the Palestinian people?
Hmm.
I think we're being joined now by Dee as well. Yes, I see Dee here. Hello, Dee. How are you?
Doing great, thank you. It's good to see you, Madeline and Joe.
It's good to
Hi.
see you too. Uh, okay, if anybody else would like to start off in reading this first article, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, why don't you do it, Dee?
Okay, I'd have to put it up. Oh, no, I can see it. I can see it, Joe. You'd have to move it along for me.
Okay, I can move it along for you.
Okay, I don't see the top part. You see, the U.S. government often claims to stand for justice and the rule of law, but it is willing to stand by those principles but is it willing to stand for those principles for the Palestinian people?
I don't know. I
That's
don't
the
know.
million-dollar the millions of dollars question.
I haven't
Okay,
seen it yet. Okay, in quote, if I must die, you must live to tell my story, wrote Dr. Rafat Aliar, a 44-year-old Gazan poet and literature professor. A few weeks later, Aliar was killed while sheltering in his sister's apartment, along with 6 family members. In the densely populated Gaza Strip, the loss of life is staggering. Israel's 2-month bombardment has killed at least 18,000 Palestinian civilians. They're including nearly 9,000 children. Another 25,000 children have lost one or both of their parents. President Biden has repeatedly assured the public that Israel is following international law. Yet, Israel forces have deliberately targeted Palestinian civilians and civilian infrastructure in direct violation of international humanitarian law, with 90% of those killed in Gaza being civilians. Only now is Biden finally admitting that Israel is bombing indiscriminately. Crazy.
Well, and to say it is one thing, to act upon it is another.
Exactly.
Yes, that's true. But even to say it is to admit that war crimes, okay,
Yes.
are going on. So, if you admit it, how can you continue to be complicit in it
Mm-hmm.
by sending weapons to the Israelis to commit, okay, these war crimes? So when he admitted it, he admitted his own guilt.
Mm-hmm. Good point. And the blood, the pools of blood start flowing
And
from his fingernails. Yep.
yes, and everything he was talking about, his administration was talking about with the situation with Ukraine
Mm.
and Russia to make sure, everything was on the up and up. You just shake your head. I mean, this is just mass slaughter.
Yeah, it is.
Russia's behavior, on the other hand, has been very different in its war, okay, with the Ukrainians. They have restricted themselves, generally speaking, to military targets or to key kinds, okay, of infrastructure that are important in prosecuting that particular war. And of course, we always have to mention that way back now, when the civilian casualties, the civilian fatalities were only at 10,000, that was more than the Ukrainian civilian casualties over 2 years.
Yeah.
And now the Israelis are at 18,000, nearly double that. That demonstrates that when it came to bombing civilians, the Russians were not intending to do that. But clearly,
Yeah.
the Israelis are because of the contrast in fatalities over a period of time.
And after the truce, the so-called truce, the Israelis accelerated their efforts. And so, like the first day, some 800 people were killed. 800 civilians in one day.
800 civilians in a single day. Those were the kinds of casualties the Russians were inflicting on the soldiers, okay, from Ukraine, not on the civilians, on the soldiers
Mm.
in battles that were going on, okay, between the two sides.
Okay,
Anyway, please continue.
homes, hospitals, schools, mosques, churches, refugee camps, and government buildings have all been reduced to rubble. Israeli troops have forced Palestinian men to strip and parade throughout the streets. There are disturbing eyewitness allegations of torture and summary executions of civilians. Palestinian human rights groups and many international experts, including Israeli scholars of the Holocaust, have warned that Israel's actions meet the legal standard of genocide. Article 2 of the 1948 Genocide Convention
I
defines.
should add at this point, the United States is a signator to that convention. We signed it.
And so did Israel, for that matter.
Oh, I didn't realize Israel had signed
Yes.
it.
Israel, and it probably, because it had to do with genocide, and it was 1948, it probably figured, the rationale was probably to protect itself from genocide.
Probably.
Because it was very soon after World War II. But yeah, any signator to that treaty can enact it against another signator of the treaty at any time. So let's there might be another way out of this mess, but the political will has to exist in some one of the other countries that are a signature to it. Colombia is a signature to it as well.
Okay,
Okay,
please go on, Dee.
let me start again. Article 2 of the 1948 Genocide Convention defines genocide as specific acts taken, in quote, with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Quote, no, some of these acts include, in quote, killing members of the group, quote, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, and, quote, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part.
Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo,
And that,
indeed.
oh yeah.
Uh, and one of the reasons why, okay, it's bingo is who recently said that the intention of the Israelis was to thin out
Mm,
population, okay, of Gaza.
mm.
That the purpose of the bombing was to thin out the
Yeah.
population.
Yeah, there
Oh
were
It
yeah.
several.
was Netanyahu. Okay, it was Netanyahu. He was
Mm-hmm.
giving orders.
Yeah.
You can't get any clearer than that.
Exactly.
I don't think you
Well,
can.
Well, and then when you see, and I know you just read it, when you see people, journalists standing in front of totally bombed out hospitals, not partially bombed out, totally bombed out hospitals. And then some journalists take you inside of the hospital and you see the mess that's been created inside the hospital. Okay, and then the school that was blown up. The UNRWA school that was blown up. These should be off limits. Every one of these locations should be off limits against international law.
Yes, they are. They are off limits, okay, according to international law.
Yes, exactly.
You can only attack those kinds of sites when you are certain that there's a military objective there. And you have to have certain evidence. There
Hmm.
can't be any doubt.
And you
And,
have to. Sorry.
and of course, in the situation that's been going on, okay, in Gaza, The Israelis have been on fishing expeditions.
Yes.
They have not known that the Hamas leadership has been in these various places. They've had hints of this or that, okay, or the other thing. And in most of the attacks, they have not been able to prove that any Hamas people are there.
Remember the bombing of Jebeliah? You know, that first day, oh, we got him. Did you? And then there was a second day of bombing, and then a third day, and more. And then that big, all the hoopla around whether it was a Hamas rocket or an Israeli rocket that destroyed that one hospital, Al Shifa, I guess. You know, but then you look after that and you see the deliberate targeting of all the other hospitals. How can you possibly think that what happened at that other hospital was not part of their plan?
Right, and here we have to look at the article we just read in Dee's program,
Mhm,
the Intercept article by Jeremy Scahill.
mhm,
Uh, he specifically pointed to the idea that the Israelis think themselves that they know how many civilians are present in
mhm,
facilities they're going to attack, that they have such precise knowledge
mhm,
of how many family members are going to be there, how many civilians are going to be there. And when they decide to attack a particular place, it's not random. Okay?
mhm.
It's very often highly specific. And by the way, there's evidence that the killing, okay, of Rafit uh, Alair,
Mhm.
uh, okay, I'm sorry, okay, it's Rifat, okay, Alair, that his killing might well have been a deliberate killing,
Yes, I
that
think it
they
was.
were upset with him because his poetry and his literature was so effective
Mhm.
at expressing the severe the severe experiences the Palestinians are living through, and the Israelis wanted to shut him up. And he is not a leader of Hamas, okay, in any
No.
way. He's just someone exercising his right of free speech, okay, a poet and a humanist killed because the Israelis didn't like what he was saying.
And they want
Mhm.
to wipe, yes, and they want to wipe out all memory of what's going on, what had happened. And I saw I saw a tribute to him on Electronic Intifada.
Yes,
Anybody who wants to see that, I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop crying because all of his, many of his students were part of the tribute, and they all said, you know, for the one killing, there will be hundreds of us behind you, because he taught them, Rafat taught them to find their voices, their inner voices, and it was all. I mean, even that the the I'm blanking on the name of the marker. But you know, even his words. Well, you know, the toughest thing I have is that marker. You know, I'm an academic, and if the Israelis decide to charge and barge in here, I'm going to throw it at them. He said, even if it's the last thing I do. So everybody's got those markers and the expo markers. They've all got the expo markers in their hands. I mean, that's gives new meaning to the pen is mightier than the sword. But that's what he was. That's who he was.
there was also a particularly moving program,
Mm-hmm.
uh, okay, of Aaron Mates, okay, and Max Blumenthal,
Ah.
okay, on their show. Uh, um, 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 uh, uh, Evidently, Max was friends, okay, with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
He knew him well, and uh, the depth of feeling expressed in that stroke,
Yes.
in that show, okay, was extraordinary.
Yes.
and you really begin to see the real Max come out, okay, in
Mm,
that.
mm,
And what, uh, in covering things like this, he is very frequently present, okay, and he's there, and you can see that the process of covering these things
mm.
is really torture for him.
Yes.
He does it anyway, okay, and he does it in a way that's full, okay, of feeling. And anyway, that show was very, very powerful also.
Yeah, and I mean, this is bringing out so many feelings from for many of us. And I'm watching like some of the other journalists from Gaza, and they're just, they're ripping my insides out and talking about hunger and thirst, and how if we make it through this bomb and we survive the white phosphorus, will we survive the hunger, will we survive? And these are fighters, every single one of them, even the young children who are asked about their parents, or who are asked about their dreams, what they want to do, what they want to be when they get older. There's so much humanity in it. I think, that's what is lacking oftentimes in the reporting about it, and also obviously in the minds of the Israelis, who just do not want to give in and acknowledge the humanity of the Palestinians.
Yeah, well, they knew exactly where he was at too, because he
Hmm.
had left. He had left where he was at and went to, with his family. So they knew, they were able to track him.
Yes, and they did track him, and they did
Yeah.
kill
Yeah, he was nervous about staying where he was, putting other people in danger, and guess it didn't. See now, yeah, with this, if the Israelis can do this, why didn't they stop the October 7th attack?
Exactly.
But anyway, that's another story for another day.
it. It is. Okay, Dee, please pick
O-
up.
Okay, we have to go down further because we covered this with Article 2 of the 1948 Geneva Convention. We covered that, and then we go down to the
Oh, yeah,
mass
right. I
killing.
went up again because of Rafik. Yes.
Mm.
Okay, I think we have to go back again a bit.
Back again. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was just under the paragraph. We stopped at the 1948.
By the way, just in this one moment, I'm sad too,
Oh,
Steve, about the poet. But the one thing I didn't say is I was looking to see if because for a moment I lost the link to the tribute, so I was trying to find it by searching for it. First thing that came up in the English language press: poet, terrorist supporting poet Rafit or Rifat. I mean, in the U.S. media, he's a terrorist and a terrorist supporter. I mean, it just boggles the mind.
Yes, it
So,
does.
exactly. This is how sick. Just sick.
mhm.
Okay. The mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza schools, medical facilities, shelters, and residential areas are all evidence of likely genocidal acts, as are the forced relocation of over 1 million Palestinians out of northern Gaza and Israel's frequent bombing of civilian evacuation routes. Meanwhile, Israel has intensified its complete siege of Gaza, depriving Palestinians of food, water, electricity, fuel, and medical supplies. Starvation and infectious diseases are rampant. Gaza's healthcare system has completely collapsed from ongoing Israeli strikes, according to
Yes.
Doctors Without Borders. Proving genocidal intent can often be difficult. However, experts have pointed to dehumanizing statements by Israeli leaders that hint at it, including calling that Palestinians, in quote, human animals and, in quote, children of darkness. Others are more explicit. An Israeli lawmaker called for a, quote, Nakba, an Arabic reference to the violent mass displacement of Palestinians, quote, that will overshadow the Nakba of 1948. The defense minister declared, quote, we will eliminate everything in Gaza. And a recent investigation by the Israeli 972 magazine found that Israel's bombing of non-military targets is, in quote, calculated. Many experts believe these actions and statements of intent are evidence of an unfolding genocide. Due to the crime's gravity, all parties to the Genocide Convention, including the U.S., have a legal duty to prevent it from the moment they learn of a serious risk that a genocide will be committed. But it already has been committed. Instead,
It seems to me, okay, at this point, that the government of the United States, specifically Blinken and Biden and Jake Sullivan, okay, Victoria Nuland, they all must know that genocidal acts fitting the definition
Mhm.
have been committed already, okay, up to this time. And so this is the proof that they are complicit in the performance of this genocide, and that they will be complicit until they stop it.
mhm.
And
But
many, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dee.
no, this was Madeline. I was just going to say, even if they stop it and they will no longer be complicit, they were complicit up to this point.
Absolutely.
That doesn't exonerate them for what they've done to this point, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that is right. Absolutely right.
Instead, the U.S. has vetoed UN Security Council ceasefire resolutions and expedited lethal arms to Israel on top of the annual aid we already provide. Far from preventing a genocide, a lawsuit by the Center for Constitutional Rights argues the U.S. is complicit in one. The October 7th attacks by Hamas fighters on Israeli civilians were reprehensible crimes, but they don't provide legal or moral justification for the collective punishment of Gazan civilians, nor can genocide ever be justified.
Exactly.
No government is above the law and free to commit mass slaughter. The U.S. government often claims to stand for justice and the rule of law, but it is willing to stand by those principles, but isn't willing to stand by those principles for the Palestinian people. At this dire moment, with the world watching, the U.S. not only has the ability but the obligation to secure a permanent ceasefire and save innocent lives.
Okay, I thought that was also a terrific article and very good as a compliment, okay, to the Intercept article.
Yes.
Uh,
Agreed.
it really brought the focus to the definition, okay, of genocide and how the events actually fit, okay, the definition. And that is really so important in coming to the conclusion that it is happening and that we all have an obligation to stop it.
And so often people say, and I published the rules about genocide about 10 days ago, a week to 10 days ago, because people will say, they're still saying, oh, you're just throwing around that word genocide. You're repeating what you've been told. You should look it up. You should see what genocide means. And I said, okay. And I looked it up, and she referred to it in her article here, Farah, and the definition fits the events almost to a T, in at least 3 out of the 5 aspects, maybe 4. And so don't ever tell me to look it up again. And if somebody challenges you, anybody listening, no, it's not a genocide. You're just mouthing the words. You're repeating what you've been told. There are plenty of valid legal arguments, and this article discusses many of them.
So guess what? We
What?
looked it up, okay, and it talks like one, it looks like one, walks like one.
Yeah. Then it must be one. It must be genocide.
Exactly. Okay, it must be one. I didn't mean to take this other one as. Okay, the next one is from Counterpunch, and I'm going to present that. Okay, at this point, and this is a pretty good one too. It's like it's called "Getting Serious About Halting Israeli Genocide." This is a Medea Benjamin and Nicholas J.S. Davies article.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she's the former head of Code Pink, okay, who is, I believe, still on the board there, but a peace activist now for a very, very long time. And who would like to read this one out?
No, you can. I mean, well, I would need the link to it to read it.
Okay, I can easily read it then.
Okay.
That is not a problem. Okay, so on Friday, December 8th, the UN Security Council met under Article 99
Mm-hmm.
for only the fourth time in the UN's history. Article 99 is an emergency provision that allows the Secretary General to summon the Security Council to respond to a crisis that, quote, threatens the maintenance of international peace and security, unquote. The previous occasions were the Belgian invasion of the Congo in 1960, the hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Iran in 1979, and Lebanon's civil war in 1989. Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the Security Council that he invoked Article 99 to demand an immediate ceasefire, quote unquote, okay, in Gaza. Sorry, I scrolled down a little too fast. In Gaza, because we're at a breaking point, quote unquote, with a, quote, high risk of the total collapse of the humanitarian support system in Gaza, unquote. The United Arab Emirates drafted a ceasefire resolution that quickly garnered 97 co-sponsors. The World Food Program has reported that Gaza is on the brink of mass starvation, with 9 out of 10 people spending entire days with no food. The 2 days before Gutierrez invoked Article 99, Rafah was the only one of Gaza's 5 districts to which the UN was able to deliver any aid at all. The Secretary General stressed that, quote, the brutality perpetrated by Hamas can never justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. International humanitarian law cannot be applied selectively. It is binding on all parties equally at all times, and the obligation to observe it does not depend on reciprocity, unquote. And Mr. Gutierrez concluded, quote, the people of Gaza are looking into the abyss. The eyes of the world and the eyes of history are watching. It's time to act, unquote. UN members delivered eloquent, persuasive pleas for the immediate humanitarian ceasefire the resolution called for, and the Council voted 13-1 with the UK abstaining. Okay, the UK abstained. It didn't vote. I'm going to vote against the resolution.
Mm-mm.
One of the 5 veto-wielding permanent members of the Security Council killed the resolution. leaving the council impotent to act as the Secretary General warned that must. This was the 16th time. Uh, uh, this was the 16th U.S. Security Council veto since 2000. And 14 of those vetoes have been to shield Israel and or U.S. policy on Israel and Palestine from international action or accountability. While Russia and China have vetoed resolutions on a variety of issues around the world, from Myanmar to Venezuela. There is no parallel for the U.S.'s extraordinary use of its veto primarily to provide an exceptional impunity under international law for one other country. The consequences of this veto could hardly be more serious, as Brazil's UN ambassador Sergio Franca Diniz told the Council. If the U.S. hadn't vetoed a previous resolution that Brazil drafted on October 18th, quote, thousands of lives would have been saved, unquote. And if the Indonesian representative asked, quote, how many more must die before this relentless assault is halted? 20,000? 50,000? 100,000, unquote. Following the previous U.S. veto of a ceasefire at the Security Council, the UN General Assembly took up the global call for a ceasefire, and the resolution sponsored by Jordan passed by 120 votes to 14, with 45 abstentions. The 12 small countries who voted with the United States and Israel represented less than 1% of the world's population. And of course, those were countries that were very beholden to the United States, okay, and Israel, or Israel. The isolated diplomatic position in which the United States found itself should have been a wake up call, especially coming a week after a Data for Progress poll found that 66% of Americans supported a ceasefire, while a Mariv poll, that's an Israeli polling organization, found that only 29% of Israelis supported an imminent ground invasion of Gaza. After the United States again slammed the Security Council door in Palestine's face on December 8th, the desperate need to end the massacre in Gaza returned to the UN General Assembly on December 12th. An identical resolution to the one the U.S. vetoed in the Security Council was approved by a vote of 153 to 10, with 33 more yes votes than the one in October. While General Assembly resolutions are not binding, they do carry political weight, and this one sends a clear message that the international community is disgusted by the carnage in Gaza. One other powerful instrument the world can use to try to compel an end to this massacre is the Genocide Convention, which both Israel and the United States have ratified. It only takes one country to bring a case before the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, under the convention. And while cases can drag on for years, the ICA can take preliminary measures to protect the victims in the meantime. On January 23rd, 2020, the court did exactly that in a case brought by the Gambia against the nation of Myanmar, alleging genocide against the Rohingya minority. In a brutal military campaign in late 2017, there was a massacre of tens of thousands of Rohingya by Myanmar and burnt down dozens of villages. 740,000 of the Rohingyas fled into Bangladesh, and a UN-backed fact-finding mission found that the 600,000 who remained in the nation of Myanmar, quote, may face a greater threat of genocide than ever, unquote. China vetoed a referral to the criminal court, the ICC, of the International Criminal Court, ICC, in the Security Council. So the Gambia itself, recovering from 20 years of repression under a brutal dictatorship, submitted a case to the ICJ under the Genocide Convention. That opened the door for a unanimous ruling by 17 judges at the ICJ that uh, okay, the state, okay, the state, okay, the state, okay, Myanmar must prevent a genocide against the Rohingya as the Genocide Convention required. The ICJ issued that ruling as a preventive measure, the equivalent of a preliminary injunction in a domestic court, even though its final ruling on the merits of the case might be many years away. It also ordered uh, okay, the nation, the leaders uh, of Myanmar to file a report with the court every 6 months in detail how it is protecting the Rohingya, signaling serious ongoing scrutiny of Myanmar's conduct. So, which country will step up to bring an ICJ case against Israel under the Genocide Convention? Activists are already discussing that with a number of countries. Roots Action and World Beyond War have created an action alert that you could use to send messages to 10 of the most likely candidates. South Africa, Chile, Colombia, Jordan, Ireland, Belize, Turkey, Bolivia, Honduras, and Brazil. So that's something that one can do. There has also been increasing pressure on the International Criminal Court to take up the case against Israel. The ICC has been quick to investigate Hamas for war crimes, but has been dragging its feet on investigating Israel. After a recent visit to the region, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan was not allowed by Israel to enter Gaza, and he was criticized by Palestinians for visiting areas attacked by Hamas on October 7th, but not visiting the hundreds of illegal Israeli settlements, checkpoints, and refugee camps in the occupied West Bank. However, as long as the world is faced with the United States' tragic and debilitating abuse of institutions, the rest of the world depends on uh, 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 international law. The economic and diplomatic actions of individual countries may have more impact than their speeches in New York. While historically there have been about 24 countries that have not recognized Israel, in the past 2 months, Belize and Bolivia have severed ties with Israel, while others, Bahrain, Chad, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, Jordan, and Turkey, have withdrawn their uh, uh, ambassadors. Other countries are trying to have it both ways, condemning Israel publicly but maintaining their economic interests. At the UN Security Council, Egypt explicitly accused Israel of genocide and the U.S. of obstructing a ceasefire. And yet, Egypt's long-standing partnership with Israel in the blockade of Gaza and its continuing role even today in restricting the entry of uh, uh, humanitarian aid that is needed, end its cooperation with the Israeli blockade, and reevaluate its obsequious and compromised relationships with Israel and the United States. But Qatar, which has worked hard to negotiate an Israeli ceasefire in Gaza, was eloquent in its denunciation of Israeli genocide in the Security Council. But Qatar was speaking on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which includes Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. Under the so-called Abraham Accords, the sheikhs of Bahrain, and UAE have turned their backs on Palestine to sign on to a toxic brew of self-serving commercial relations and hundred millions of dollars arms deal with Israel. In New York, the UAE sponsored the latest failed Security Council resolution, and its representative declared, quote, the international system is teetering on the brink. For this, war signals that might makes right, that compliance with international humanitarian law depends on the identity of the victim and the perpetrator, unquote. Truer words than that were never spoken. And yet, neither the UAE nor Bahrain, has renounced their Abraham deals with Israel, nor their roles in U.S., quote, might makes right policies that have wreaked havoc in the Middle East for decades. Over 1,000 U.S. Air Force personnel and dozens of U.S. warplanes are still based at the Al Dhafra Air Base in Abu Dhabi, while the city of Manama in Bahrain, which the U.S. Navy has used as a base since 1941, remains the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. But many experts compare apartheid Israel to apartheid South Africa. Speeches of the UN may have helped to bring down South Africa's apartheid regime, but change didn't come until countries around the world embraced a global campaign to economically and politically isolate it. The reason Israel's diehard supporters in the United States have tried to ban or even criminalize the campaign for boycott, divestment, and sanctions of BDS is not that uh, um, 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 it is illegitimate or anti-Semitic. It is precisely because boycotting, sanctioning, and divesting from Israel may be an effective strategy to help bring down its genocidal, expansionist, and unaccountable regime.
Joe, may I add something here?
You may, please do.
Yeah, when we were reading in another article tonight that anything that the Palestinians tried to do is to resist, whether it was nonviolent, like the march of the right of return marches in 2018 and 2019, um, whatever it was, there was one technique that was noticeably absent from that, and that was BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction, which is a true nonviolent way of putting pressure on the Israeli regime, and not and it was in state after state in the United States. The Israelis did everything they could to stop BDS from growing. And I'm in agreement with you. I'm in agreement with this article that BDS could be, or should be, an effective technique, along with everything else, to pressure Israel into abandoning its genocide.
And in this context, we should mention that many states and local areas inside of the United States are passing legislation uh, contending that BDS, is illegal.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
essentially
that's
making it illegal. That legislation is clearly, in my view, in violation of the Constitution of the United States.
no, exactly,
Because,
exactly.
I mean, those kinds of laws are violations of the First Amendment. They haven't had time to go through the courts yet. But I think even this Supreme Court would have to rule that people coming together to advocate for boycotting and for divestment and for sanctions, that is political activity that's protected by the Constitution. And it's outrageous that these states, and localities have been passing these laws that are clearly unconstitutional and
And
been able to get away with it until now.
basically allowing the government to extend its vision, its eyesight into boardrooms of companies, and then act if they don't like the direction that that company is going in. And I, from some when I was in New Jersey in the U.S. and we were fighting against some of these measures, we would make the argument to our senators that this was in violation of the First Amendment, and that actually it actually had more of an impact than some of the other arguments we made on other issues. But it didn't stop or prevent these laws from going through. But it is a very strong argument. Yet, I mean, we've got something similar going on with presidents of universities not wanting to come straight out and say that certain statements by students or violations, are calling for genocide and need to be stopped because they want to know the context. They want to know what's going on, and before they just make a blanket statement like that.
Okay.
And we've got
To hold you off for a couple of minutes on this.
okay.
The next article is bringing up that particular.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. You had no
All
way
right.
of knowing that.
Okay.
Okay, but anyway, a U.S. Alternate representative to the UN, Robert Wood, told the Security Council that there is a fundamental disconnect between the discussions that we have been having in this chamber and the realities on the ground, unquote, in Gaza, implying that only Israeli and U.S. views of the conflict deserve to be taken
Mm.
um, um, seriously. But the real disconnect at the root of this crisis is the one between the isolated looking glass world of U.S. and Israeli politics and the real world that is crying out for a ceasefire and justice for Palestinians. While Israel, with U.S. bombs and howitzer shells, is killing and maiming thousands of innocent people, the rest of the world is appalled by these crimes against humanity. The grassroots clamor to end the massacre keeps building, but global leaders must move beyond non binding votes and investigations to boycotting Israeli products, putting an embargo on weapons sales, and breaking diplomatic relations, and other measures that will make Israel a pariah state on the world stage. So it seems to me that's an article that offers some practical things that people can do to put a stop to that. Those practical things may or may not work, or may not work uh, in time uh, to stop thousands more deaths. But it seems to me it's something we have to try.
Yeah, you mean invoking the Genocide Convention? That's the one. I'm going
Invoke
to go.
the Genocide Convention and trying to get some other nations that are in a position to do so
Yes.
to make formal complaints and to bring this to the International Court of Justice.
Yeah, I'm going to find that letter because being here in Colombia, I have an ability. I can ask other Colombians to join me, and we know, of course, how how opposed Gustavo Petro is to the genocide happening in Gaza. So he would be a likely candidate for sure.
He certainly would be a likely candidate. And if you get started on those activities, then we could do a show on it, of course.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And that would be very, very apt.
Okay.
So let's go on to what's been going on, okay, in the universities. This is a
And
piece from.
I figured out how to see this if you put it in the room. So if you want me to read it, I can.
Okay, great. That's great.
But I need it to be in the room. I found the full screen option on your on your StreamYard.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The full screen option is extremely useful.
But you
Okay, if you'd like to read it, go ahead, Madeline.
I will, and you'll move it along for me, right?
I will move it along for you.
Okay, so the top does down a minute because this first photo is from of pro-Palestinian demonstrators marching in solidarity with two Columbia University student groups, which were recently banned from campus for their support of Palestine, November 15th, 2023, outside of the gates of Columbia University in New York City, New York.
Yeah. By the way, that was shameful.
Yes.
Shameful
Yes.
by that university.
Yes, and something you wouldn't necessarily anticipate happening at Columbia, but okay. Stop bullying. Is that stop bullying? Because
Yes,
there's
it is.
okay. U.S. students calling for justice for Palestine. Those stop bullying U.S. students calling for justice for Palestine. I got it now. Those speaking out for Palestine are protesting the political injustice and illegality of the status quo. They have the right to speak out, and we should vigorously defend that right. This is by Jeffrey Sachs and Sybil Faris, and it was written December 13th, 2023, and posted in Common Dreams. The bullying of America's universities.
We should mention here, Jeffrey Sachs,
Yes.
okay, is the head of a very, very important center, okay, at that particular university.
Mm,
Okay, and Sybil Farris is a member of um, um, his staff. Okay,
mm,
Jeffrey Sachs is also very active
yes.
in trying to bring peace to the international system. He's all over the place. His activities are very effective in persuading people, okay, to support efforts, okay, at peace. And uh, it's clear to me the university is acting directly in conflict with some of its most famous and important faculty.
Yeah, and Jeffrey Sachs, you're absolutely right. He's I saw his interview with Chris Hedges uh, a couple months ago, and he was right on. He was really effective as a speaker.
He is effective in many other contexts.
Hmm.
He's been on with the Duran. Yeah, he's been on, okay, with the Judge Napolitano show.
Okay.
He's been on with. Oh, I could go on and on if I could remember the shows, but it seems everywhere I turn,
Yes.
Jeffrey Sachs is doing, okay, an interview and trying to bring people together over Ukraine and over Israel, okay, and Gaza, and
More
also
power to him.
uh,
Mhm.
also with respect to China, because he's
Mm.
been very concerned about what is going on in terms of the Pacific and the movement of American foreign policy to the Pacific, which is going on right now. It's just behind the scenes. It's just not completely in front of our face. Okay, and
Well,
Jeffrey Sachs has been trying to bring the Chinese together uh, 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 with our foreign policy people to try to damp down the tensions that have been growing so serious there. And he's trusted by the Chinese. Okay,
Yeah,
anyway, that's about.
there's, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, there isn't that much that we're seeing here about international relations above and beyond, for obvious reasons, the Israeli um, massacres in Gaza, so and in Palestine in general. So it's good to hear that he's still working on some of those important issues. Um, so the bullying of America's universities and their students by Congress and donors threatens to destroy a crucial pillar of American democracy, political free speech. The war in Gaza has inflamed tensions in the US and around the world. Yet, rather than encourage public deliberation, historical understanding, and the search for peace, politicians and donors are aiming to shut down public opposition to the policies of the Israeli government. The latest victim, and this is what I had begun to talk about earlier, the latest victim of the bullying is the University of Pennsylvania, where the president of the university and the chairman of the board of trustees were induced to resign after attacks by Representative Elise Stefanik, Republican, New York. Stefanik, I've been reading her missives on this. Oh, she's
She's awful.
she's awful. And Jeffrey Sachs will say it better than I here. Stefanik crudely twisted basic terms in her verbal attack on three university presidents. Her vulgar manipulation and a push from Wall Street donors, led by a CEO of a private equity firm, has brought a top university to its knees. While the Harvard trustees back the Harvard president, the assault on the universities continues. The UPenn donor has now sent the university a list of highly intrusive questions regarding hiring, student admissions, course selection, and other topics core to academic freedom and governance. The executive director of the Penn chapter of the American Association of University Professors wrote that, quote, today, unelected trustees with no academic expertise are evidently attempting a hostile takeover of the core academic functions of the University of Pennsylvania, functions related to curriculum, research, and the hiring and evaluation of faculty, unquote. In attacking the UPenn president, Stefanik baselessly asserted that universities are not cracking down on students who are calling for genocide against the Jews. The charge is bogus. Student protests are not calling for genocide, but for Palestinian political rights. AP has debunked false claims made on social media that pro-Palestinian protesters are calling for Jewish genocide. On the contrary, the protesters were charging Israel with genocide in Gaza, a charge supported by the Center for Constitutional Rights.
Okay, I have to comment here briefly.
Okay.
This whole movement to say the students are calling for genocide, for genocide, against the Jews, is so ridiculous, in the context of the genocide that's going on in terms of the Palestinians. And the idea that they would do such a thing when places like the Center for Constitutional Rights, are essentially giving the lie to what they have to say, and yet they still continue to say it, to me is really mind-boggling. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. These people like Stefanik, they have no respect for any sort, okay, of institutions.
No,
They're
no.
simply demagogues.
Well, and this is where I bring in um, the platform of the Likud party in Israel. The very first point in that platform of the Likud party ends with between the sea and the river. That's the Mediterranean Sea, right? No, Red Sea, Dead Sea. Between the sea and the Jordan River, that I know for sure. Um, there will be nothing but Israeli sovereignty. Has anybody called out that Likud platform for implicitly and not so implicitly calling for genocide? If you're going to say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is a call for genocide, then you must say from the sea to the river there will be nothing but Israeli sovereignty. You must say that is also a call for genocide. I disagree with both. Okay, with either being called genocide, but if you're gonna do one, you got to do the other.
Yes, if you have any desire for consistency, okay, at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and also the trouble, even with suggesting consistency, okay, in this case, is that uh, the people who are saying from the river to the sea, okay, are talking about the rights of the Palestinians from
Right.
the river to the sea, not a Palestinian state, okay, from the river to the sea. Whereas the Israelis, when they're talking about the sea to the river, they are talking about a greater Israel state
Mm-hmm.
from the
Yes.
sea to the river,
Yes.
and implying that there will be either a genocide of the Palestinians or an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians.
Yes.
One of those two things. So they are implying war crimes.
Indeed, they are.
Palestinians are not.
No, they want an end to the occupation. That could take many forms. They want to be able to live, breathe, eat, move, drink clean water, those kinds of things. Very different. Very different. You're absolutely right. And I mean, it's hidden. That's just one of the things that makes me as frustrated as can be, because these folks are only looking at one half of the equation, and they're distorting that half to boot. So anyway, there may be cases of individuals calling for genocide, but nobody has yet produced even a single documented case that this applies to the campus protests, much less that it constitutes a widespread pattern. During testimony of 3 university presidents before the House Education and Workforce Committee, how did it get this far? The House held a hearing on this. Stefanik crudely misrepresented the meaning of terms to make her phony case. When questioning President Gay of Harvard, she asked, "Will admissions offers be rescinded, or any disciplinary action be taken against students or applicants who say from the river to the sea, or intifada, advocating for the murder of Jews?" Oh, help me now. Wow. Stefanik's charge that these terms quote, advocating for the murder of Jews, unquote, is baseless. The two phrases are about politics, not murder. As even it is the Mediterranean Sea. As even Stefanik probably knows, the phrase, quote, from the river to the sea, unquote, is about who governs the territory from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. The expression and closely related phrases are used by those Israelis who reject the state of Palestine and by those Palestinians who reject the state of Israel. And so here we are. I didn't know he included this. The 1977 manifesto of Israel's right-wing Likud party, that is, Prime Minister Netanyahu's party, declared, between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty, unquote. In 2014, Israel's agriculture minister stated, quote, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, there will be only one state, which is Israel, unquote. Israel's self-professed fascist finance minister Bezalel Smotrich recently gave a speech with maps showing Greater Israel, including the West Bank, Gaza, and parts of Syria and Jordan, that is, Greater Israel from the river to the sea. Thus, both Israelis and Palestinians invoke the concept. By itself, it is a political concept, not a call to murder, but a claim of political sovereignty. It could take on a murderous intent in some contexts or by some speakers. For example, if an Israeli right-winger used the phrase specifically to justify the mass destruction and depopulation of Gaza. In their testimony, all the more important since the very premise of the questioning, that student protesters are calling for a Jewish genocide, is false. The claim that context matters is far too subtle for the likes of Stefanik, who is using language for bullying, not for facts or honest dialogue. Since context matters, here is the real context of the campus protests. Students are protesting a political status quo in which Israel has already killed more than 17,700 Gazans, of whom 70% were women and children, using U.S.-supplied munitions, has destroyed homes, hospitals, and schools, displacing nearly 2 million Gazans, and has deprived the entire population of food, safe water, health care, and other essential needs. The students are protesting a political status quo in which Israel already rules from the river to the sea and invokes that very concept in the call for a greater Israel. The students are rejecting Israel's repeated violations of UN Security Council resolutions, including the resolution declaring Israel's West Bank settlements to be a, quote, flagrant violation, unquote, of international law with, quote, no legal validity, unquote. Again, there may be individual cases of hate speech, of course, but the campus protests, go back a moment, please, are about politics. Thank you. And then on.
Sorry, I scrolled down too fast.
That's all right. The claim, we already did the highlighted, we already read the highlighted quote.
Yes.
In calling for intifada, the students are calling for political change, not murder. This is really important. The word intifada, Arabic, intifada, it's pronounced basically the same, means quote unquote resistance. It originates from the root word nafad, Nafed, which translates to shake away, in other words, to shake off oppression. For decades, the call for intifada has been a call for Palestinian self-determination and independence, and is fully compatible with either a one-state or two-state solution. Yes.
Very, very important point and very well done by Jeff.
Yeah, it's similar to what people say about jihad. As one of the first lessons I learned after 9/11, that the US media misused the word jihad. And now with intifada, I just learned something new. Completely and totally misuse, misrepresent, and distort the meaning of intifada. And he's going to go on here, Jeff is going to, by saying Thomas Jefferson made the case for an American intifada in the Declaration of Independence. That is, the shaking off of British rule. When Palestinians demand an end to Israeli occupation of Palestine, they are following Jefferson. Take that, Stefanik, take that. Quote, governments are instituted among men and women, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Unquote. Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, beautifully done. That was beautifully done.
While Stefanik is trying to squelch free speech and political protest, Arab and Islamic leaders are reiterating their long-standing call for peace based on the two-state solution. Israel should be agreeing with the Arab and Islamic countries, the UN Security Council, and the Palestinian Authority on the two-state solution. In such a peace, troops, including from the Arab states, would be deployed by the UN Security Council to secure the peace in Gaza and demobilize violent militias. Palestine would become the 194th permanent member of the United Nations, as it requested a dozen years ago, before the request was blocked by, yes, the Obama administration. In sum, students speaking out for Palestine are protesting the political injustice and illegality of the status quo. They have the right to speak out, and we should vigorously defend that right. Congress should stop bullying our students and fulfill its most urgent task, ending the mass killings in Gaza and forging a path to peace. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I have to add to that a very important point, that it's not only the students who are getting bullied, but it's everybody who is coming out for Palestinian rights and who is criticizing the Israeli regime, using their constitutional right of free speech and free press to criticize, the Israeli regime. Our society has been mobilized against the critics by the people in power. They're using all kinds of unfair means to try to suppress our rights to free speech, and free press. This has become a First Amendment issue, and it's really, really fundamental. We see how the First Amendment is critical to political change, how it is fundamental to mobilizing the moral sense of our people, okay, and our population. And we see how the people in power are trying to cripple those kinds of efforts so they can pursue policies which are clearly illegal under international law and are immoral in the best sense of that term. They're just totally immoral. They shouldn't be being pursued. The people who are pursuing them know their policies, okay, are evil, but out of a sense of pragmatism or short-term gains, okay, in politics, they're performing evil, and we're having to fight that, and they're trying to take away our ability to fight that by removing our free speech rights. That is what is going on in the United States today. It is completely undermining democracy. And I have to now relate, okay, to the title of this program. This is Empowering Democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And this program, this series, cannot tolerate the kinds of activities that are being taken now by our politicians to try to repress the voice, okay, of the opposition in relation to these foreign policy issues.
Can I add just a little something?
You're very welcome.
Okay, because that was so beautifully stated. I don't want to take away from it.
Well, that's
And
quite all right. I'm sure yours will be very beautifully stated.
no, and this is academic freedom as well. I mean, it's freedom of speech, but it's getting to the heart of where freedom of speech, the pursuit of the truth. Students are asked, to open their mind and inquire freely into the U.S. history, world history, you name it. And for this to be occurring with university presidents also, who are trying to reflect that freedom, the academic freedom, as well as freedom of speech, it's particularly frightening. And it was bad enough. It's bad enough when it comes to boycott, divest, and sanction that has been affected by the long arm of the Israeli lobby. But to get to the heart of academic freedom and freedom of speech, freedom to learn and study and question, it's very unsettling.
Right. What they've been doing is striking at the heart, okay, um, 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 of our democracy, or so-called democracy.
Yes.
It's part of their continuing efforts to undermine democracy here in the United States. And we often associate the undermining, okay, of democracy with the fascist movements in our country, and particularly with the activities, okay, of Donald Trump. Okay, but Donald
Mhm.
Trump is not in power now. It's the
Mhm.
Democratic Party, okay, that's in power now, and it's a Democratic Party and the media helping them that is undertaking these efforts to undermine the protests and the rights, okay, of free speech and free press. Uh, that those people who are supportive of the Palestinians have. And
Yes.
that's just got to be stopped. It's a big issue, okay, in itself,
Agreed.
because it strikes at the possibility of our being effective and changing things towards uh, uh, the uh, 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 the right course uh, 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 of foreign policy. in the end, I think that the idea, okay, of democracy is about peaceful change. Peaceful change cannot occur without a critical discussion and voicing of ideas and allowing the conflict of ideas and allowing consensus, okay, to emerge out of that. It doesn't always emerge out of that, but if it's going to emerge, it does emerge out of that, okay, a true consensus. Uh,
Yeah,
and they've been undermining our efforts for years to reach true consensus, okay, on a number of issues, not just on these particular foreign policy issues, but now, very importantly, on these particular foreign policy issues, because we are getting to the point where the foreign policy of the United States is threatening our very existence now, and that has to stop. We need change in foreign policy, and we can't get it as long as the people in power are suppressing our First Amendment rights.
and trying to impose an authoritarian view. Joe, on that note, I'm going to slip out quietly.
Okay, thank you very much for coming,
You're
Madeline, and
very
for
welcome.
contributing. I think
Thank you.
we had a wonderful discussion tonight.
Oh, I agree, and thank you for all the opportunity to chime in and comment. We'll see you soon.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Madeline. It was great. I enjoyed both programs.
Yeah, and I wasn't going to do either.
But it was a
But
great therapy session. It was a great therapy session to get it all out, you know?
yes, well, but then I think more and dialogue more and reflect off of, respond to other people. When you're by yourself and your stomach is being tied in knots and your brain is screaming that something's got to change, this is a whole lot better. So,
Yes.
so good night and see you all soon.
Okay, good night, Madeline.
Good night, Madeline.
Okay, so I know it's late, Dee, but if you're willing to hang in there,
Okay.
I have one more thing to do. It
Okay.
sort of puts this all, okay, in a broader context. It's a new column um, by Pepe Escobar,
Okay. Good.
and it's called BRICS and the Resistance Axis, a Convergence, okay, of Goals. And I'm going to present the piece now. I just found that it wasn't in my original schedule, but I just found it this evening, and I thought it was important, and I wanted to feature it. So the tagline is: the Gaza war has accelerated cooperation between global South behemoths resisting Western-backed conflict. Together, the Russian-led BRICS and Iran-led axis of resistance can shape a U.S.-free West Asia. So that's an interesting sort of objective. I personally think uh, if that objective is fulfilled, it might actually be very good for the United States, because I don't think, okay, that we belong there. So here's a picture. Okay, I should try to decipher this picture as much as I can. And that, of course, is Putin, okay, on your left of the picture, and Mohammed bin Salman, okay, the MBS, okay, of Saudi Arabia. Uh, oh, not actually the king, okay, of Saudi Arabia yet, but the prince who was actually ruling the country. Okay, and this is the sheikh of, I think it's the United Arab Emirates, but uh, we'll be sure of that in just a second. Uh, okay, and he is known, okay, not as MBS, but I think as MBJ. I may be mistaken about that, but I'll correct that in just a minute too. And this is the president, of Iran, whose name, is Mohammed Raisi. And these are four critical figures in actually bringing peace to West Asia. Last week, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a notable pit stop, in the UAE and Saudi Arabia to meet, respectively, the Emirati president, specifically Mohammed bin Zayed, and that is MBZ rather than MBJ as I stated it, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was MBS, before flying back to Moscow to meet with the Iranian president Ibrahim Raisi. The three key issues in all three meetings, confirmed by diplomatic sources, were Gaza, OPEC Plus, and BRICS expansion. They are, of course, interlinked. The Russian-Iran strategic partnership is developing at breakneck speed alongside Russia, Saudi Arabia, especially on OPEC Plus, and Russia, UAE investments. This is already leading to stark shifts in defense interconnection across West Asia. The long-term implications for Israel, way beyond the Gaza tragedy, are stark. So now we're talking about the geopolitical implications for Israel here. Very, very important. This is beyond the Gaza war and treats the more long-term situation. It's also relevant, too, for the way our rulers talk. Is they're constantly talking about the Russian threat, to Europe, because now that their military is so strong, if we don't do something with respect to Ukraine, if we don't continue to support, the Ukrainians, then what's likely to happen is that the Russians are going to march into Europe again, and we're going to have the situation there that we had before with satellites, of Russia. However, the truth is, the attention of Russia is no longer on Europe. They have no intention to march into Europe. They're beginning to see the whole continent of Europe as just a backwater of economic development, and as an area that's not really important to the future, of Russia. And one area where Russia is really concentrating is the interconnections to West Asia, and to the Middle East. And our funding of the war in Ukraine, or continued funding of that, is not going to stop what Russia has been doing in the area, of West Asia. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that what Russia is doing in West Asia is not constructive. I think it actually is constructive, and I think it would be very good for the United States to move out, of West Asia and let things be there. We're not really welcome there anymore anyway. Anyway, Putin said to Raisi something that was extraordinary on so many levels. Quote, when I was flying over Iran, I wanted to land in Tehran and to meet you. But I was informed that you wanted to make a visit to Moscow. Relations between our countries are growing rapidly. Please convey my best wishes to the Supreme Leader who supports our relations. Putin's reference to, quote, flying over Iran directly connects with four armed Sukhoi Su-35s flying in formation escorting the presidential plane over 4,000 by kilometers, if measured as a straight line from Moscow to Abu Dhabi, without any landing or refueling. As every stunned military analyst remarked, an American F-35 is capable of flying at best 2,500 kilometers without refueling. Yet the most important element is that both NBC and MBS authorized the Russian Su-35s escorts over their territory, which is something extremely unusual in diplomatic circles, which it is. And it's a very friendly gesture, both K by MBS, K and MBZ. That leads us to the key takeaway. With a single move on the aerial chessboard, compounded with the subsequent clincher with respect to Raisi, Moscow accomplished 4 tasks. Putin proved, graphically speaking, that this is a new West Asia where the U.S. Hegemon is a secondary actor, destroyed the neocon political myth of Russian isolation, demonstrated ample military supremacy, and lastly, as the start of Russia's BRICS presidency approaches, showed that it retains all its crucial geopolitical and geoeconomic cards. Next section is called Kill Them, but softly. The original 5 BRICS, led by the Russia-China Strategic Partnership, will open their doors to 3 major West Asian powers, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE on the 1st of January 2024. That, okay, my friends, is a little more than 2 weeks away. Their accession to the multipolar powerhouse offers these countries an exceptional platform for broader markets and is likely to accompany a flurry of investments and tech exchanges. The long-term, sophisticated game played by Russia-China is leading to a complete tectonic change in the geoeconomics and geopolitics of West Asia. BRICS 10 leadership, considering that the 11th member, Argentina, for the moment is a wild card at best, even has the potential under a Russian presidency to become an effective counterpart to the toothless UN. And that leads us to the complex interaction between BRICS and the axis of resistance. At first, there were some reasons to suspect that the bland condemnation of the genocide in Gaza by the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation was a sign, of cowardice. Yet a renewed appraisal may reveal everything is evolving organically when it comes to the intersection of the big picture design by the late Iranian Quds Force Commander General Qasem Soleimani. If you recall, he was murdered by Donald Trump. With the meticulous micro-planning by Gaza's Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, who knows the Israeli mentality inside out and considered in detail its devastating military response. Arguably the most incandescent focus of detailed discussions in Moscow these past few days is that we may be approaching the point where, quote, a signal, unquote, will unleash a concerted axis of resistance response. For the moment, what we have are sporadic attacks, Hezbollah destroying Israel's communication towers facing the southern Lebanon border. Also, Iraq's resistance forces attacking U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, and Yemen's, and Sarala, completely blocking the Red Sea for Israeli ships. All that does not form a concerted, coordinated offensive yet, and that would explain the desperation within the Biden administration in Washington, complete with rumors that it needs Israel to finish Plan Gaza between Christmas and the start of January. Not only have the global optics of the Gaza assault become horrifyingly unsustainable, but most of all, a lengthier military campaign dramatically raises the likelihood of a, quote, signal, unquote, to the axis of resistance. And that will result in the end of all the hegemons' elaborate plans for West Asia. The geopolitical goals of Zionism are quite clear. Reestablish its self-constructed order of dominance in West Asia and maintain steady control over U.S. foreign policy and the military alliance. But depravity is a key component for accomplishing these goals. It's so easy to bomb, shell, and burn ultra-soft civilian targets, including thousands of women and children, turning Gaza into a vast cemetery, while the white man's burden club urges Israeli occupation forces to kill them, of course, but more silently. Cure to toxic Atlanticist and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen offering bribes in person to Egypt's and Jordan's leaders, 10 billion to Cairo and 5 billion to Amman, as confirmed with Brussels diplomats. That's the mind-numbing EU solution to stopping the Gaza genocide. All Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Jordanian King Abdullah bin al-Hussein would need to do is to, quote, facilitate, unquote, the forced exodus and final ethnic cleansing of Gaza to their respective territories, because the eschatological goal of Zionism remains an undiluted final solution, whatever happens in the battleground. And of course, as the 7th of October, Hamas-led Al-Aqsa flood operation suggests, to destroy Jerusalem's Islamic Al-Aqsa Mosque and build a Jewish third temple on top of its ashes. The next section is what happens when, quote, the signal, unquote, comes. So what we have is essentially Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's emigration, or annihilation plan. Versus what veteran West Asia expert Alistair Crook has memorably coined as, quote, Sykes-Picot is dead, unquote. That phrase means that Arab and Iranian inclusion in BRICS will eventually rewrite the rules in West Asia to the detriment of the Zionist project. There's even a strong possibility this time around that Israel's certified war crimes in Gaza will be prosecuted as Palestinians, Arabs, and the Muslim uh, um, nations, with full BRIC support, form a global South recognized commission to take Tel Aviv and its armed forces to court. Forget the tainted ICC, servile as it remains to the hegemon's rule-based order. The BRICS will help usher international law back to the forefront of the global scene as intended when the UN was born in 1945 before it was castrated. The Gaza Genocide is also forcing all latitudes among the global South to be more inclusive, as in delving into the wisdom of our common intertwined pre-modern history. Everyone with a conscience has been forced to dig deeply into oneself to find explanations for the inexcusable. In this sense, we are all Palestinians now. As it stands, no power, the West because it refuses it, the BRICS and the Global South because they have not yet made their play, has been capable of stopping a final solution conducted by a racist, ethnocentric ideology. Yet that also opens the startling possibility that no power will be strong enough to stop the axis of resistance when the quote signal unquote comes to pull the curtain down on the Zionist project. By that time, the Axis will have a supreme sort of, a moral imperative, supreme, recognized, even urged by populations across the globe. So that's where we are now, evaluating the incandescent asymmetry between the impotence and the imperative. The deadlock will be broken, perhaps sooner than we all expect. That evokes a comparison with the previous deadlock, the current impasse between a perverse, trashy version of Hebraic civilization, quote unquote, and emerging Islamic nationalism, let's call it, quote, civilization, Islam, unquote. This mirrors where we were in December 2021 when Russian proposed treaties on the indivisibility of security, quote unquote, were turned down by Washington. In hindsight, that was the last chance for a peaceful way out of the clash between the heartland, that's the combination of Europe and Asia, and the rimland, which is basically the islands and the areas surrounding the heartland, including, of course, North and South America. The hegemon rejected it. Russia made its play and accelerated exponentially the decline of the hegemon. The song remains the same, from the steppes of Donbass to the oil fields of West Asia. How can the multipolar South, increasingly represented by the expanded BRICS, how can it manage a raging, fearful, out of control imperialist West, staring into the abyss of moral, political, and financial collapse? So I thought that context of broader political change was essential to our previous discussion of what is going on in Gaza, in Israel. It's always important to lift our eyes from the specific, no matter how horrible that is, from the standpoint of war crimes, to the more general situation, which is a very hopeful situation where the forces that are creating genocide, in Gaza right now are likely to be defeated and are likely to have to withdraw from the whole arena, of West Asia, which will then be integrated by much more constructive kinds, of forces. So I did want to point that out. And on that note, I'm going to close, the Pepe Escobar piece. So Dee, have you any comments on that one?
Not really. It was a very good article. It's very much to the point.
It was very much to the point, and I thought it was very eloquent in how
Yes.
he wrote it and stated it. I mean, that guy is a wonderful journalist
Mm-hmm.
and very incisive, in his analysis. And he's so aware of the shifting trends of power, in international relations. He's just an important voice to pay attention to. People are saying good night. Steve Wolfbrand says, just give peace a chance. Steve says, I have to get to bed. Good night, everybody. Bed, sorry. He said this at 10:32. Kay says, night, Steve. And Steve says, good night, Kay, at 10:33. We're now at 10:55. That was the last of our comments. I see Cowboy Kitty
Yes.
at 10:55. Well, thank you, Cowboy Kitty, but it's a bit late, and we're about ready to sign off. But thank you for coming in anyway.
And I just wanted to say, I thought that too, bringing up with BRICS, the global south and, the changing world with Palestine. And throughout the year, we've brought that up, in our many conversations with that.
Yes, we have. And our conversations on the two shows,
Yes.
and Around the World with Dee and Friends, and our conversations here on the International Relations show, within the Empowering Democracy category. We have only one show a week, on international relations, but generally, as opposed to your 4 or 5. But one of the things we try to do on this one show is to track the geopolitical trends and the impacts that the wars in Ukraine and Israel are having in relation to the geopolitical trends, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what we were addressing here tonight. Kay says, thank you, Joe and Dee. Great show. And thank you, Kay, for coming. And thank you for the
appreciation. Always good to see. Yes, it's always good to see Kay.
Yes, it is. She is essential to our show. Our shows, actually.
Yes.
So, anyway, of course, please buy me a coffee and please buy Dee a coffee. And also, please occasionally visit, my Patreon account.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
Share. And hopefully, this particular show, which I think was extraordinary on a number of grounds, will be picked up and made to go viral across the internet. We need something like that.
Yes, we do. Yes.
So good night, everybody, and I'll be back tomorrow night. I don't know whether you will be back, Dee, since it's a Friday night, and you're not always back on Friday night, but I will be back with the Dump the Corruption show tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Yes, you will. And I'll see what's going on.
And Dee will likely be, if she doesn't have a show tomorrow, I'm sure she will have one over the weekend.
Yes.
I will be there with her at least once, over the weekend. Okay, so
Sounds
good
good.
night, everybody. And
Yes,
thanks.
good night, everybody. Thank you, Joe.
And
Good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Okay. All righty.
Okay, good night.